never thought that delivering my granddaughter's forgotten lunchbox would be the exact instant my child decided I was her nemesis. "You're taking away my liberty. I despise residing under the same roof with you." Those were the words Chloe screeched, shrill and irate, before she slammed her bedroom door with enough force to make the hallway mirror tremble. I stood there, utterly foolish. One hand still held the shimmering lunchbox with the small fox decal Lena had attached herself, and the other clutched something inside my chest that hurt so suddenly I feared it was my heart. I didn't pursue her. I didn't shout after her. I didn't utter a sound. Not because I was incapable, but because something within me had shattered. Not loudly or dramatically, just a silent fracture, like aged lumber under strain. Clean. Final. What had I genuinely done? Requested that she not leave dishes in the sink all night? Reminded her that Lena's reading tutor required payment this week? Or perhaps it was when I mentioned an open position at the community center. Nothing grand, but stable employment. None of that should have triggered such a tantrum. But when someone already perceives you as an obstruction, even kindness can feel like a form of control. I stood in that corridor until my feet ached. The lunchbox felt heavier, and my thoughts drifted back to the day they moved in. All her bags, her sorrowful eyes, Lena's tiny arms wrapped around my waist as if I were a sanctuary, as if I were home. And now, I was a prison warden in my own house. She claimed I was stealing her freedom, but what about my own? That evening, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the pull-out sofa in the living room, the same one I had given up my bed for, staring at the ceiling. The shadows resembled bars, and I knew even then that something had fundamentally shifted between us, something that wouldn't ever return to what it was. It had been precisely 61 days, not weeks, not a brief period, but exactly 61 days since Chloe and Lena had taken residence in my home. She had called late on a damp Tuesday night, her voice trembling just as it had when she was 9 and couldn't locate her backpack. "I just need a place to catch my breath, Mom," she had pleaded. "Only a couple of weeks, I promise." Her lease had expired, her last paycheck had bounced, Lena's school was threatening to disenroll her over overdue meal fees. It was urgent and temporary, or so she said. I didn't hesitate. Of course they could come. I packed up my bedroom that same night and relocated to the pullout in the living room without a second thought. Chloe required peace. Lena required consistency. I thought I was providing both. I filled the refrigerator with oat milk and that expensive cereal Lena adored. I cleared a spot in the garage for Chloe's boxes, all 13 of them. I even canceled my volunteer shifts at the botanical garden to be available for school pickups. The house had been too silent since my husband passed away. Their voices filled it. I didn't mind. Not at first. What I hadn't anticipated was how swiftly the atmosphere would change. Chloe began taking over things as if they were their own. The laundry schedule, the grocery list, even the thermostat. She didn't ask. She simply moved in and assumed authority. Still, I dismissed it. I told myself it was stress. I told myself she was attempting to regain control in a life that had spiraled. I told myself 1,000 gentle falsehoods because I desired tranquility more than dignity. But peace is not the same as silence. And as I lay awake again on that lumpy sofa, every compromise I had made began to appear less like love and more like surrender. Initially, the issues were minor, hardly worth mentioning. She mocked me for purchasing canned beets, called my shopping list nursing home chic, and laughed as if it were an innocent jest. Then I noticed my pill organizer was absent from the bathroom cabinet. 3 days later, I found it behind the toaster, buried under junk mail. She claimed Lena must have been playing with it. Lena doesn't even approach the kitchen counter. Then there was the evening of the parent-teacher conference. Lena's teacher had sent an email inquiring if a guardian could attend. I brought it up during dinner and said I'd be happy to go. Chloe giggled, not cruelly, but dismissively. That's sweet, Mom, but it's really more of a parent thing. The way she said the word parent, with just enough emphasis to make it sting. I didn't argue. I simply washed the dishes while she scrolled on her phone, her untouched plate still warm. But the real rupture came 4 weeks ago. I tried to log into my bank account to pay the water bill, and it wouldn't let me in. Password invalid, recovery email changed. I stared at the screen, bewildered at first, then alarmed. I questioned Chloe about it the next morning. She didn't even look up from the kitchen table. "Oh yeah, I meant to tell you. I updated your login. I'm helping you stay organized. You keep too many sticky notes with your passwords. It's not safe." She was logged into my personal checking account, my retirement account. She'd rerouted paper statements to her email. "Don't worry," she added with a bright grin. "I'm only managing things until you can catch up with technology." I nodded, composed on the outside, but inside, something broke. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on the darkened living room, listening to the refrigerator's hum, and thought, this is not my home anymore. Not truly. And if I didn't take action soon, I would lose more than just passwords. I would lose myself. She believed I was helpless. She always underestimated me when it came to anything involving numbers. I wasn't a lawyer or a physician, no, but I had spent 35 years in corporate compliance, scrutinizing fine print. Most people disregard contracts, policy updates, and employee handbooks. No one ever opened them. My vision has always been sharpest where it matters most, in the margins where errors are concealed. What Chloe didn't know was that every crucial document in my life was printed, notarized, and filed by me, not some digital portal. Hard copies, originals, no digital signature nonsense. I never trusted the cloud. The house deed was in my name exclusively. I had refinanced after bill passed, locking in at 3.1%. The title resides in a sealed manila envelope inside a fireproof box in my closet, along with the durable power of attorney I filed after my gallbladder incident in 2018. Witnessed, notarized, and legally binding. My passwords were saved in a leather-bound planner in my sewing cabinet, not some digital app she could access. She thought she had seized control, but she hadn't even scratched the surface. I sat on the sofa that morning, robe still tied, coffee growing cold, and opened that planner as if it were scripture. I flipped to the tab labeled Legal. There it was, a list of everything Chloe didn't know she couldn't touch. My accounts, my attorney's contact information, my living trust naming Lena as the secondary beneficiary, not Chloe. She thought I was some doddering old woman with expired credentials and no digital prowess, but I'd always known how to protect myself. I just hadn't wanted to believe I needed to. Now I did. And while Chloe breezed around my kitchen sipping oat milk and planning her next cutting remark, I quietly gathered the tools she never even thought to look for. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I was going to document, prepare, and act. The next morning, I changed into jeans, pulled my hair into a clip, and walked across the street with a folder tucked under my arm. Audrey answered before I even knocked. "You're early," she said, eyeing the manila envelope. "Or is this a social call disguised as paperwork?" "Both," I replied. "You still keep that paralegal mind sharp." Audrey had been retired for 10 years, but she never stopped reading case law like other women read novels. She'd been my walking companion until arthritis slowed me down and a sprained ankle stopped her completely. We still chatted across our driveways, exchanging pies during the holidays, but this time I wasn't here with banana bread. I laid the documents out on her dining table, the deed, the guardianship form from Chloe's rehab stay in 2018, a printout of the email Lena's school had sent last week, and a screenshot of my locked-out bank login. Audrey flipped through everything slowly, her lips pressed tighter with every page. "Let me guess," she said finally. "You want her out, legally, cleanly." I nodded once, without screaming, without dragging Lena through it. She tapped her fingers against the edge of the folder, then stood up and disappeared down the hall. When she came back, she held her old laptop and a flash drive the size of a paperclip. I've still got templates from my days at Barker & Lowe. Let's start with a notice to vacate, cite tenancy at will, and give her 30 days. But if she pushes back, she held up the guardianship document like a shield. We remind her what she signed, and we do it in writing. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled completely. Not relief, not yet, but something close. The sensation of having someone in your corner, someone who sees what is happening and doesn't ask you to justify your pain. "I'll type it up tonight," Audrey said, already booting up the laptop. "She won't know what hit her." And just like that, I had an ally. Not loud, not dramatic, just intelligent, just ready. This wasn't about vengeance. That word never resonated with me. Vengeance is bitter, sharp, designed to inflict harm, and I wasn't trying to harm anyone, not even her. I simply wanted something back that should have never been taken. Tranquility, boundaries, the right to feel secure in my own home. My objective was straightforward: restoration. My space, my life, my rhythm, all of it had been chipped away by small indignities, backhanded remarks, and a sort of entitled presence that grew more oppressive with each passing day. I didn't want to win. I wanted to breathe. And I wanted Lena to have a stable roof over her head that didn't involve her mother yanking her from one school district to another every 6 months. That little girl needed structure and predictability, not whispered threats about leaving or digs about old grandma rules. She deserved better. And if Chloe couldn't provide it, I would. I wasn't kicking Chloe out to be cruel. I was giving her exactly what she claimed to want: freedom. The very thing she had screamed at me about. "I despise living under the same roof as you." Fine, now she wouldn't have to. But she wouldn't take my roof with her. I went into the garage that afternoon and started organizing. Not my belongings, hers. Boxes still half packed from the day she moved in. Never fully unpacked because she never intended to stay. Old hair salon equipment, a tote of expired protein shakes, Lena's winter coat still with the tags on it. I made space without guilt. For the first time in a long while, I moved through my home without shrinking myself to make room for someone else's turmoil. It didn't feel cruel. It felt necessary, because this wasn't just about setting boundaries anymore. This was about rebuilding what I had allowed to collapse. And I was ready. That night, I went to switch off the kitchen lights and noticed her laptop sitting open on the counter. She always kept it locked, password protected, the screen dimming the instant she stepped away. But this time, for whatever reason, perhaps she was distracted, maybe too self-assured, she left it open. I should have walked past, I know that. But something drew me toward it. Not curiosity, not spite, just instinct. A need to know what I was truly up against. 2 browser tabs were open. One was a listing for a studio apartment, furnished, available immediately, no pets allowed. The address was downtown Boston, nowhere near Lena's school. The second tab stopped me cold. It was a school transfer form, already completed, Lena's name, her current school, and the new one, a public elementary nearly 2 hours away. The address matched the listing. All it needed was a signature. I stood there for a long time, staring at the screen. So this had never been temporary. Chloe wasn't trying to stabilize. She was preparing to uproot, to yank Lena out of everything she knew and drag her into another reset, another version of starting over that was really just a pattern repeating itself. And she hadn't said a word. No discussion, no warning, just quiet arrangements in the background of my own house, on my own counter, under the roof I built. I closed the laptop gently, not touching a single key, and turned off the light. Upstairs, Lena was already asleep, one hand curled under her cheek. I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Her peace didn't align with the chaos her mother was planning, and I wasn't going to allow it. Chloe could pursue whatever freedom she desired, but she wasn't taking that child with her. By morning, my hands were steady. I didn't slam drawers or confront her at breakfast. I didn't make speeches or raise my voice. I've learned over the years that real action doesn't have to be loud, just precise. Down in the filing cabinet, tucked behind insurance records and tax folders, was a manila envelope labeled simply Lena. Inside was a guardianship agreement Chloe had signed during her rehab stay in 2018. Temporary custody, she had called it, just in case. At the time, she had been frightened, humble, willing to put her daughter's needs before her pride. It was signed, witnessed, notarized, and still valid. I scanned it on my old printer, attached it to an email addressed to Lena's school registrar, and added a short, polite note. Please be advised that any transfer or withdrawal request must be accompanied by my written consent per the attached guardianship documentation. No accusations, no drama, just language the district would understand. Clear, calm, and legally binding. I also called the front office and left a message confirming the email, telling them I'd be happy to bring in the original if needed. Then I logged the time, printed a copy of the sent email, and placed it back in the Lena folder, because I knew how this would unfold. Chloe would try to say it was a mistake, that she was just exploring options or didn't intend to submit it yet. But that form was real, and the timing wasn't accidental. I didn't need to catch her red-handed. I just needed to make it impossible for her to act in silence. I speak the language of paper trails and procedural blocks, and now the school would too. She could plan whatever she liked, but I would always be 10 steps ahead when it came to protecting Lena. 2 days later, the house phone line went dead. At first, I thought it was service issue. I checked the router, reset the connection, jiggled the line where it ran along the baseboard. Nothing. Then I noticed the modem was gone, the entire device unplugged and missing. Chloe was in the kitchen, dressed for work, sipping her green smoothie as if the world owed her gratitude. I asked calmly, "Did something happen to the landline?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, I canceled it. No one uses house phones anymore." I stared at her. "You canceled the account tied to my name in my house without asking?" She shrugged. "It was a waste of money, and Lena's been using my cell anyway. You should really upgrade, Mom." That wasn't carelessness, it was deliberate. One more thread severed, one more way to isolate me, limit communication, erase control. That night, I overheard her in the living room. She thought I was upstairs, but I had forgotten my cardigan and had stepped quietly into the hallway. Chloe was curled up next to Lena on the couch, her voice soft and syrupy. "Grandma's going to move to a nice little home soon with nurses and bingo and all the things old ladies like. She just doesn't know it yet." Lena didn't say anything. She just leaned against her mother's arm, confused but obedient. Chloe must have sensed me. She turned and saw me in the shadows, her eyes narrowing for a brief second before she smiled. "You know, Mom, you've been tense lately. You might want to think about a senior community. They have shuttle buses, therapy dogs. It'd be good for you." I walked past her without answering, picked up my sweater, took out the trash, and let her believe I was frail, weary, and detached. But what she didn't know was that I'd already seen her scheme, and I was constructing my own.
It's funny what people leave behind when they think no one's watching. Chloe had a habit of printing things and forgetting to retrieve them from the tray. Or perhaps she thought I couldn't read without bifocals anymore. Either way, I found the first breadcrumb early Thursday morning, buried under grocery circulars and one of Lena's spelling worksheets. It was a blank power of attorney form, state-issued, generic, downloaded, and half-filled. My name at the top, her name on the signature line. She had my birth date wrong, off by 2 days. She probably thought guessing was close enough. The carelessness would have been comical if it weren't so revealing. The second breadcrumb came in the form of a text message left open on her phone while she showered. I'd gone into the kitchen to grab my planner when her phone lit up with the message preview. "If I get POA, I can finally sell this damn place." I didn't touch it. I didn't take screenshots or snoop further. I just read the words, clear, unmistakable, and committed them to memory. That's what this was all about. Not a misunderstanding, not family tension. It was about control, ownership. She wanted my house, my accounts, my exit, and she thought paperwork would do the heavy lifting. I walked back into my sewing room, pulled out the legal folder again, and added the forged POA draft. I slipped it in next to the guardianship papers in the scanned email to Lena's school. Each item told a story, a timeline, a motive. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't being dramatic. I was observant and finally done pretending her actions were accidental. She was building a case around my supposed decline. I was building a file around her intent. The difference? Mine would hold up in court. I couldn't sleep. The fake POA sat in my folder like a ticking clock. The lies weren't slowing down, they were accelerating. And people like Chloe didn't backtrack when confronted. They doubled down. So I started digging. It began with a gut feeling. I typed her full name into the county's public records portal. Nothing unusual. A traffic ticket from 3 years ago. Some change of address filings. The usual clutter. But then, under financial disclosures, something stood out. A loan application. Recently denied. I clicked through the PDF. She had applied for a small business loan, listing her intended salon startup, a mobile service for bridal parties. The address she gave wasn't her last apartment. It wasn't even this house. Technically, it was my address, listed as her permanent residence and collateral base. She had tried to use my property as leverage without telling me. The application had been denied, insufficient assets, poor credit, unstable income. But still, she had tried, boldly, quietly, as if my name, my home, and my legacy were pieces on her personal chessboard. I printed the full document, highlighted the address, and slid it into the growing envelope marked records. This wasn't just a daughter pushing boundaries. This was identity misuse, potential fraud, a pattern. The worst part? I hadn't even been surprised. There was a numbness that came with betrayal in slow motion, when it didn't crash all at once, but instead eroded detail by detail until trust became disbelief, and disbelief became cold certainty. She wasn't waiting for me to die. She was trying to write me out while I was still breathing, but I wasn't going anywhere. That night, I sat alone in the laundry room. Not by design. It was the only space that left that still felt like mine. The washer rumbled quietly, some load of Chloe's going through its second rinse. I didn't care. I just sat on the old wooden stool, knees tucked close, the envelope of evidence in my lap. I didn't cry right away. Not from shock. That had passed. Not from fear. That was fading too. It was grief, and it was quiet. Not a wailing, desperate grief, no drama. Just a dull ache pressing against my ribs. A familiar heaviness I'd carried before but never wanted to name. I had given so much of myself to mothering. My time, my energy, my compromises, always making things easier, softer, more comfortable for everyone else. Even when it cost me sleep, money, or peace, it had become second nature. Chloe had been difficult even as a teenager, defiant, sharp-tongued, impulsive. But I thought I'd done enough over the years to anchor her. I thought Lena had changed her. Motherhood often does. It humbles you. It makes you reach for your better self. But not Chloe. Motherhood had made her more determined to manipulate, not less. I pulled a towel from the dryer and folded it slowly, smoothing each corner with care. My hand still worked. My mind still worked. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't fading. But I had let myself believe that being quiet was the same as being kind. It wasn't. Being quiet had made me easy to erase. And that's what hurt the most. Not what she was trying to take, but how easily she thought I'd let her do it. I pressed the last folded towel to my chest and whispered no more. Not another night of silence. This wasn't going to end with a plea. It would end with a signature, and mine would be the last one on the page. Saturday morning, I made 2 telephone calls. The first was to Daniel, Chloe's ex-husband, Lena's father. We hadn't spoken directly in over a year, but we'd always been cordial. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious until he heard mine. "Is Lena okay?" he asked immediately. "She's fine," I said, "but I'd like you to pick her up this afternoon, just for the weekend." He hesitated, then asked the right question. "Does Chloe know I'm coming?" "No," I said, "and I'd like to keep it that way. I'll have her ready by 3. He didn't push. "I'll be there." The second call was to the locksmith. His name was Marcus, recommended by Audrey, an older gentleman, discreet. I told him I needed new locks, front and back, installed Sunday morning. He didn't ask why, just said, "I can be there at 11 sharp." That afternoon, I packed Lena's overnight bag, added her favorite stuffed bear, the one with the missing eye, and an extra hairbrush. Chloe came home from work just as Daniel pulled into the driveway. She didn't have time to argue. "I need to talk to him," I said flatly. "Alone." She stood frozen on the porch while Lena ran to her dad. I handed him the bag, kissed my granddaughter on the forehead, and said, "Have fun. I'll see you tomorrow." Daniel looked at me longer than necessary. Something passed between us. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. I nodded once, and he drove away. Back inside, Chloe started in. Demands, accusations. "You don't get to make decisions like that without me." I didn't argue. I went into my room, closed the door, and wrote her name on a plain white envelope. By the time she realized what was happening, it would already be done. At exactly 8:30 p.m. on Sunday, Chloe pulled into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the porch like searchlights. I was already waiting, not by the door, but just behind it. Lights off, blinds drawn. The new locks had been installed that morning. Clean, quiet, no drama. Marcus had been as efficient as promised. He even tested the deadbolt twice, just to be sure. Now Chloe was standing in the dark, jiggling the doorknob with growing frustration. Then came the pounding. "Mom, open the door!" Her voice pitched higher, angrier. She slammed her palm against the glass, rattling the pane. I stayed still, listening, watching through the peephole as she stepped back, disbelief etched across her face. 2 suitcases sat neatly on the welcome mat. I'd packed them myself. Her clothes, her hair tools, even the makeup bag she always left sprawled across the bathroom counter. Everything she had claimed as permanent in this house, zipped up and waiting. On top of the luggage sat a white envelope with her name in my handwriting, centered and underlined once. Chloe stared at it like it was written in another language. She picked it up, opened it, and read the letter I'd rewritten 3 times to get the tone right. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't cruel. Just clear. "Chloe, you said you hated living under this roof. Now you don't have to. This is not punishment. This is consequence. You are not locked out. You are free. Good luck. Mom. I watched her face as she read. First confusion, then fury. She yelled something, I couldn't hear what, but she didn't try to kick the door in or break a window. She stood there, fists clenched, chest heaving. Then finally she understood. This wasn't a threat. It was finished. Inside the envelope she held was more than a note. Tucked behind the letter were 3 documents, copied and neatly stapled. No commentary, no explanation, just facts. The first was a copy of the house deed, clearly listing me as the sole owner. No shared title, no cosigner, just my name. Purchased in 2002, refinanced in 2015, paid in full 2 years later. Chloe had never contributed a dollar. She knew that, but now she had it in writing. The second was the unsigned power of attorney form she'd printed and left in the tray. I'd circled the incorrect birth date in red ink and attached a post-it note that simply read, "This is not yours to fill out." And the third, the guardianship document from 2018, still valid, still enforceable, with her signature and the state seal. I'd highlighted the clause giving me full decision-making rights regarding Lena's schooling and residence in the event of parental instability. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to argue. I gave her what she respects. Paperwork. Chloe stood on the porch, reading through each sheet with trembling hands, her lips moving silently as she reread certain lines. The longer she stood there, the more her bravado dissolved. She wasn't locked out in the middle of the night. She was being released from the lie she'd built, the one where she controlled everything, including me. She had her freedom, her suitcases, and a studio apartment listing waiting on her laptop if she still wanted it. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the kitchen window watching her pace the porch. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. And that, I realized, was the real victory.
She called the police. Of course she did. 20 minutes after she left the porch, headlights returned. Not hers this time. Red and blue lights flashed against the walls of my living room. I didn't panic. I already had the folder ready. 2 officers stepped onto the porch. Younger, polite, careful. Chloe stood behind them with arms crossed and a tremor in her jaw that had nothing to do with the cold. "Ma'am," one said gently, "your daughter's concerned about your well-being. She mentioned potential elder abuse, mental confusion, being locked out of your residence." I nodded, handed over the folder I'd labeled Home and Legal. Inside were my property deed, ID, and power of attorney documents, none assigned to Chloe, and a copy of her attempted forgery. The officers read silently. Then one glanced over at Chloe. "Ma'am, do you have proof of residence here? Mail? A lease?" Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I've lived here for months," she snapped. "This is my mother." "That may be true," the officer said, his tone now firmer. "But without legal residence or a rental agreement, this is her property. She has the right to change the locks." Chloe's eyes snapped to mine. For the first time in weeks, she looked unsure, small. "This isn't right," she muttered. "I just need to stay one more night." "You said you hated living here," I replied, steady. "Now you don't have to." The officers turned back to her. "We can't force her to let you in. Do you have somewhere else you can go tonight?" She didn't answer. 10 minutes later, they were gone. So was she. I locked the door behind them, then stood in the hallway. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in months, I didn't feel cornered in my own home. By Monday morning, the story had made its way online. Chloe posted a long message on Facebook, dramatic, breathless, littered with phrases like, "My abusive mother kicked me out into the cold," and Elder manipulation turned against me. She turned off the comments after just 10 minutes, but not before Susan got there. Susan, my neighbor of 22 years, who waters my petunias when I'm out of town and once helped shovel our shared sidewalk in a blizzard. She doesn't say much, but when she speaks, people listen. Her comment was short. I saw you screaming at your mother on the porch last week. Maybe now she has peace. No emojis, no shouting, just truth. Typed plain and hard. The silence under the post grew loud. One by one, the reactions changed. Likes disappeared. A few mutual friends, women from the salon, old classmates, unfollowed her altogether. One even messaged me privately. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it had gotten that bad. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Chloe had always relied on public sympathy, on being the struggling single mom, the misunderstood daughter, the woman barely holding it all together. That mask had worked for years, but now it had slipped, and I wasn't the one pulling it off. She had overplayed her hand. Too loud, too dramatic, too obvious. Truth, when it's quiet and steady, has a way of making noise in all the right places. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, wrapped in my cardigan, watching the leaves turn gold at the edges. The house was quiet. No slammed cabinets, no footsteps at 2 a.m., no tension rolling in like weather. Just the soft click of a keyboard inside where I was beginning to write my next letter. This time, to a lawyer. By the end of the week, the silence shifted into action. Lena's school called. The registrar thanked me for the guardianship documents and informed me that all transfer requests had been formally withdrawn. The principal also noted that any future changes would require written authorization from both legal guardians, myself and Lena's father. Daniel followed up that afternoon. He'd already filed for shared custody, temporary for now, he said, until the court decides. But considering everything that's happened, I don't think she has a case. He didn't sound smug, just relieved, like someone who had finally stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. My attorney, Audrey's referral, was efficient, calm, and thorough. She reviewed the fake POA, the school documents, the messages, and Chloe's online claims. By Thursday, we'd filed a cease and desist, demanding she stop all false statements, both verbal and written, about my health, finances, and custody status. And just like that, the story changed. Chloe moved into that studio apartment she'd bookmarked weeks earlier, the one with no pets, no dining room, and no space for a child. Lena stayed with her father that weekend. The following Monday, she came home to me. Not just to visit, to live. Chloe didn't fight it. Maybe because she knew the fight was over, maybe because she finally realized I wasn't alone, legally or otherwise. One lie at a time, she had built a story designed to isolate me. But now the truth had its own paper trail, and she was the one boxed in.